A human at the alien palace. Captain Ryan stepped off his small spacecraft and looked at the massive alien palace in front of him. It stood like a dark mountain under the stars, made of black stone that sparkled like glass. Giant statues of alien warriors guarded the entrance, each holding weapons taller than Ryan himself. The air felt heavy, and even though he was trained for missions like this, something about this place made his skin crawl. He was the first human ever invited to the palace of the Dralneri, the most feared alien race in the galaxy. They were known for their strength, strange powers, and cold hearts. Most humans avoided them. Some believed the Dralneri didn't even have feelings. But now, their queen had invited Ryan to a royal feast. Everyone back on Earth warned him, "Don't go. It's a trap." But Ryan said yes. Why? Because this wasn't just a dinner. This was a chance to make peace between two powerful races. If he succeeded, wars could end. Lives could be saved. But as Ryan walked toward the palace doors, he had a strange thought. What if they were right? What if this is a trap? Two Dralneri guards stepped forward. They were tall, over 8 feet, with long arms and glowing blue eyes. Their armor was smooth and alive, almost like it was breathing. One of them scanned Ryan with a golden device. It beeped once, then turned green. "You may enter," the guard said in a deep, echoing voice. The doors creaked open, and Ryan stepped inside. The palace was even stranger on the inside. The floors were smooth and glowing. The walls shifted colors slowly, like liquid metal. Alien music played in the background. Soft, slow, and almost sad. Giant chandeliers floated above the feast hall, glowing with purple flames. And at the end of the long table, sitting on a throne made of crystal and bone, was the queen. Queen Virexa. She was tall and beautiful, in a terrifying way. Her eyes were black with gold rings. Her crown floated above her head, spinning slowly. Her skin shimmered like the surface of a lake under moonlight. "Welcome, human," she said with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "We are honored by your presence." Ryan bowed slightly. "The honor is mine, Your Majesty." He took a seat at the long table. Strange foods were already waiting. Glowing fruits, meats that changed color, drinks that swirled like small galaxies inside glass cups. He reached for a silver goblet, but just before he could sip, a quiet voice stopped him. "Don't drink the wine." Ryan turned his head. A servant had leaned close. Her face was hidden under a silver mask, but her voice trembled. "Please," she whispered, "don't drink anything red." Before he could respond, she was gone, disappearing behind a curtain with a tray in her hands. Ryan stared at the wine. It looked normal, but now he wasn't sure. The queen raised her goblet and smiled again. "A toast," she said, "to peace between our worlds." Everyone at the table, alien nobles, soldiers, and strange guests, lifted their glasses. Ryan pretended to sip, but didn't drink. As the feast began, he noticed the queen watching him closely. She asked him questions about Earth. What did humans eat? How did they dream? What were their greatest fears? Ryan answered carefully, never sharing too much. But with every answer, the queen's smile grew wider. Then he noticed something else. The walls. They were showing images now, faint, almost invisible. Faces, human faces, some screaming, some frozen, all in pain. He blinked. Were they real, or just illusions? He leaned closer to the wall. One of the faces looked familiar. A scientist who went missing during a past mission. Everyone thought she was lost in space. Ryan's blood turned cold. Just then, the lights dimmed. A bell rang, and a deep voice announced, "Let the entertainment begin." From the side doors, tall dancers entered, spinning and floating like shadows. But something was wrong. Their eyes were empty, their movements robotic. "Are they alive?" Ryan asked the alien next to him. The alien didn't answer. It just stared forward, expressionless. Then, from the floor below, Ryan heard a low scream. It came from beneath the palace, a place hidden from sight. He stood up. "What was that sound?" he asked loudly. The queen didn't blink. "Dessert," she said calmly. Ryan sat down slowly, his heart pounding. This wasn't just a feast. Something dark was happening here, and he had just stepped right into it. The Feast of Shadows. Captain Ryan did not sleep that night. After the feast ended, the queen had nodded at him with her cold smile and disappeared behind a veil of silver curtains. The hall slowly emptied. One by one, the alien nobles left the table, saying strange blessings in their language. The music faded into silence. Only a few guards remained, standing perfectly still, like statues made of steel and bone. Ryan was shown to his guest chamber by two silent servants. The room was beautiful, filled with rare glowing crystals and soft carpets. The walls were smooth and reflective, but he noticed something odd. His reflection didn't match his movements perfectly. A half-second delay. As if the wall wasn't showing his real self, but something else. He walked over to the window. Outside, he could see the twin moons hanging over the alien world. The palace cast a long shadow that stretched across the dark sands. In that moment, Ryan realized something very clear. He wasn't here for peace. He was here for a performance. And the audience was watching him from every corner of this palace. He activated a small device hidden in his jacket, a micro-recorder linked to his AI companion orbiting above in his ship. "Log everything," he whispered. "Something's wrong. This place feels alive." Suddenly, he heard a knock. Slow, 3 taps. He turned, expecting another servant. But when he opened the door, no one was there. Just a folded piece of cloth on the floor. He picked it up. It was a napkin. From the feast. Written inside, in shaky English, were 4 words. "Run before the third." Ryan stared at the message. His heart pounded. What did it mean? Third what? Third day? Third guest? Third ritual? Before he could think further, a voice echoed through the walls. "The queen wishes to see you." He was led through narrow halls, deeper into the palace. The walls grew darker. The air felt colder. Finally, he reached a new chamber, circular, lined with mirrors. At the center was a low table filled with more food. The queen sat across from it, smiling, her fingers moving over a glowing orb. "Did you sleep well?" she asked. "Not really," Ryan replied carefully. "Your palace is very different." "We find humans fascinating," she said softly. "Your minds are like bright fires, full of emotion, full of chaos. That's rare in this galaxy." Ryan tilted his head. "Is that why you invited me?" The queen's smile widened. "In a way, I wanted to understand your kind better. And what better way than through a royal feast?" She poured him another glass of the red wine. He didn't touch it. She noticed. "You didn't drink last night either," she said. "I don't drink on duty," he replied. "Wise," she said. "Very wise." But her eyes told a different story, a calculating one. As he was escorted back to the feast hall later that evening, Ryan noticed something horrifying. There was a new guest at the table, a human. A woman in a long silver dress, sitting very still, eyes wide open. Ryan recognized her instantly. Dr. Sarah Lorne, a planetary scientist from Earth who disappeared over a year ago during a peace mission. He rushed toward her. "Dr. Lorne," he whispered. No response. He waved his hand in front of her face. She blinked, but only once. Her mouth twitched slightly. Her skin looked healthy, but her eyes were empty, hollow. Ryan turned to the guard. "She needs help. She's been missing for months." The guard didn't move. Then the queen entered. "Ah," she said softly, "you've met one of our honored guests." "She's not well," Ryan said. "You're keeping her here against her will." The queen approached. "Oh, she agreed to stay, didn't you, Sarah?" Dr. Lorne blinked again. Her lips parted. A whisper came out. "Run." Then she fell silent again. Ryan stepped back. The others at the table clapped politely, as if the moment didn't matter. The queen took her seat. "Shall we eat?" Ryan ate nothing that night. He kept his hands folded and his senses sharp. As the dishes came and went, he noticed something strange. Each guest was served something different. One dish glowed green. Another let out steam that formed shapes. A bowl of meat blinked before being eaten. No one seemed disturbed. It was normal for them. But Ryan saw a pattern. The guests who ate the most grew quieter, more dull, almost robotic. By the time dessert arrived, 2 of them had to be carried out, eyes wide, faces pale. The queen stood up. "A special tour awaits our human friend," she announced. Before Ryan could say no, the guards surrounded him. They led him to an elevator that sank deep into the palace. It was dark and slow. The walls hummed with energy. When the door opened, he found himself in a cold chamber. And then he heard it again. Screams. Soft, broken, distant. Hundreds of voices. Human. Alien. All the same sound. Pain. He turned to the queen. "What is this place?" he asked. She smiled gently. "A place of dreams," she said. "A place where minds are set free. Forever." A glass wall lit up beside them. Inside were rows of floating bodies. Humans, aliens, even robotic life forms, all hooked to machines. Their eyes moved rapidly. Their mouths were open, but silent. "Are they alive?" Ryan asked. "Yes," the queen said, "but no longer burdened by pain or fear or choice. They are part of something greater now." Ryan stared at them, frozen in shock. "You invited me here for peace," he said. "I did," the queen replied, "but peace comes in many forms." She stepped closer and whispered into his ear. "Yours will come after the 3rd night." Whispers beneath the throne. Captain Ryan sat in his chamber, staring at the floor. Hours had passed since the queen took him to that underground room full of floating bodies. Bodies of humans, aliens, and machines, kept alive but trapped in something worse than death. He couldn't stop thinking about their faces, their wide, frozen eyes, their open mouths, their stillness. He had come to this planet for peace, for diplomacy, but now he realized. This palace was not a place of welcome. It was a cage, and he was the next animal inside. He checked his micro-recorder, still working, still connected to his ship. "Log everything," he whispered again. "If I don't return in 2 days, send the footage to Earth Command." Then he walked to the window. Something outside caught his attention. A shadow was moving in the garden below. It was fast, too fast for a normal servant. He watched carefully. The figure moved from tree to tree, crawling, hiding, waiting. And then it looked up. 2 glowing yellow eyes met his from the darkness. Ryan stepped back quickly, but a message had been left behind, scratched on the inside of his glass window. 3 words. "Midnight, Hall of Bones." He took a deep breath. This was dangerous, but he had to find the truth. He had to escape this place, and he had to find out what the queen was really planning. Later that night, he snuck out. The Hall of Bones was not shown on the map he was given, but he remembered passing the dark corridor on the first night, lined with carvings and tall skull-shaped pillars. Now, alone in the silence of the palace, he crept through that hallway. It was cold. Too cold. His breath turned white in the air, and strange whispers echoed from the walls. Not in English, not in any language he knew, but somehow he understood. "She sees you. She hears your thoughts. There is no escape." Ryan kept going. At the end of the corridor, he found a black stone door, covered in carvings, a mixture of bones, wires, and alien letters that pulsed like veins. The door opened by itself. He stepped inside. The Hall of Bones was massive, like a cathedral buried deep inside the planet. Thousands of bones lined the walls, skulls of creatures from every part of the galaxy. Some large, some tiny, some with too many eyes or no eyes at all. And at the center of the hall, sitting on the floor, was a strange figure. The same one he had seen in the garden. It looked like a Dralneri, but smaller, weaker. Its body was thin, wrapped in torn robes. Its skin was pale and cracked. Its eyes glowed yellow, but not with power, with fear. "You are the human," the creature said. Ryan nodded slowly. "Who are you?" "I was once her advisor," the creature said, "before she fed on my thoughts." Ryan stepped closer. "Fed on your thoughts?" "She is not just a queen," the creature whispered. "She is a mind-eater. She lives for thousands of years by absorbing the strongest minds across the galaxy. Their memories, their energy, their fire." Ryan's stomach twisted. "What does she want from me?" "You are human," the creature said. "And human minds are different. Wild, deep, full of emotion and pain. She believes your kind holds the key to eternal power. She needs you for the final phase." Ryan's hands curled into fists. "What final phase?" The creature's voice grew weaker. "There is a machine beneath the throne, hidden deep below the palace. It connects to all minds trapped here. She feeds from them slowly, but with your mind, she will rise beyond this world." Ryan felt sick. Everything made sense now. The missing humans, the queen's strange interest in his dreams, the wine, the rituals, the third night. It wasn't just a feast. It was a harvest. "How do I destroy it?" Ryan asked. The creature looked up. "Find the throne chamber. Beneath it is a hidden lift. Use this." It handed him a small device, metal, round, and warm. "It will open the path." Suddenly, the ground shook. The creature's eyes widened. "She knows you are here. Run." Ryan turned, but before he could move, a loud screech echoed through the hall. Black armored guards burst through the door. One of them raised a stun blade and lunged at Ryan. Ryan rolled aside, grabbed a bone from the wall, and smashed it into the guard's faceplate. Sparks flew. The guard collapsed. He ran, fast, through twisting corridors, past silver statues and glowing walls. Alarms began to ring. But somehow, he escaped. Back in his chamber, he locked the door and fell to the floor, gasping for air. His hands were shaking. But now he had answers. And he had a plan. The next morning, everything was quiet again. Too quiet. Breakfast was delivered by a new servant. No mask. No words. Just silence. Ryan didn't eat. He stared at the table, then at the wall, and then at the small device in his pocket. Beneath the throne. That's where the machine is. That's where she becomes a god. And if he didn't stop it, no human would ever return from this planet again. The Queen's obsession. Captain Ryan was no longer a guest. He was a target. He knew the moment he opened his eyes the next morning. The air felt different. The walls of his chamber were watching him. He could feel it. No birds chirped outside. No soft music from the palace halls. Just silence. Heavy, sharp silence. He stood slowly and stretched, pretending everything was normal. But in his mind, he was planning, watching, waiting. His hand slipped into his jacket to check the small device the broken advisor had given him the night before. Still there, still warm. It would lead him to the machine, to the Queen's secret, to the source of her power. But first, she wanted to see him. 2 guards escorted him to a different chamber this time. It was not part of the feast hall, not part of any area he had seen before. The doors opened with a slow hiss, revealing a private garden. Floating lanterns drifted in the air. Strange alien flowers shimmered with colors that didn't exist on Earth. A waterfall flowed upside down in the distance. And sitting at the center of it all was Queen Varexa. She was dressed in a long robe that looked like it was made of stars. Her eyes shone brighter than ever. But there was something more, an energy around her. Stronger, hungrier. "Captain Ryan," she said softly, motioning for him to sit. "I was hoping we could talk. Alone." Ryan sat, but stayed alert. Every movement, every sound, it all felt like a trap. "You've been wandering," she said, "exploring parts of the palace not meant for guests." "I'm curious by nature," Ryan replied calmly. "It's a human thing." She smiled. "Curiosity is beautiful, but it can also be dangerous." He met her eyes. "Only if you're hiding something." The queen laughed gently, but her smile was colder now. "You think I'm hiding things," she said, leaning forward. "You think you've uncovered secrets that no one else has. Tell me, Ryan, what do you really think is happening here?" Ryan didn't answer. Instead, he studied her carefully. She was calm. Too calm. She already knew everything. She was playing with him. "You don't want peace," he said finally. "You want control. You want to feed off our minds. You want to become something more, something eternal." The queen didn't deny it. Instead, she stood up and walked toward the edge of the garden, her voice soft and steady. "Do you know how long I have lived, Ryan?" she asked. 3,000 years. "Do you know how many wars I've stopped? How many planets I've saved from destruction? You see this place as a prison, but it is a sanctuary, a temple of unity." "Unity?" Ryan said, standing. "You trap minds. You drain them. You destroy their will. That's not unity. That's slavery." She turned and looked at him with something unexpected in her eyes. Not anger, but sadness. "I've seen what chaos does to civilizations," she said. "Fear, war, betrayal. I watched my people nearly wipe themselves out before I learned how to stop it. Emotion is the enemy. Free will is fire, beautiful at first, but always dangerous." She stepped closer. "But your kind, your minds burn hotter than any I've seen. Your emotions are untamed. Your love, your rage, your hope, you're unpredictable, wild. That's why I chose you." Ryan stepped back. "Chose me for what?" She reached out and touched his forehead. Suddenly, he was somewhere else. He was standing in a memory. His memory. He was 10 years old, hiding under a table as bombs fell outside. His mother was screaming, pulling him out, running down the street as buildings collapsed. He blinked. Now he was older. 16. Crying over his sister's coffin. Rain poured down. Everyone else had gone. He stood there alone. He blinked again. Now he was on his first space mission, looking out at Earth from orbit, his hands shaking, tears in his eyes, awe and fear blending together. Then darkness. Ryan gasped, falling to his knees. They were back in the garden. The queen stood above him, smiling. "I touched only a fraction," she said. "And already I feel it, the fire in you, the chaos, the beauty." She helped him stand. "You don't need to die," she whispered. "Join me. Give me your mind willingly. Let me rise, and I will keep your memories alive forever. You will become part of something perfect." Ryan stared at her. And then he laughed. It started small, then grew louder. The queen frowned. "Why do you laugh?" "Because," Ryan said, "you don't understand humans at all." He stepped closer. "You think we want peace without pain, joy without heartbreak, power without struggle. But that's not what we are." He pointed to his head. "We are human because we fight through pain. We love even when we know it will hurt. We dream even when the world burns. That's what makes us strong." The queen's smile faded. "Then you choose destruction," she said. "You choose death." "No," Ryan said, stepping back. "I choose freedom." And with that, he triggered the small device in his pocket. A small pulse of light blinked under his feet. The queen looked down. Too late. A hidden path opened beneath the garden floor. A circular platform rose from the ground, glowing with symbols. Ryan jumped onto it. Guards burst into the chamber. The queen screamed, her voice no longer calm, now filled with rage. "Stop him!" But the platform sank quickly, taking Ryan deep below the palace. Deeper than he had ever gone before. Down, toward the throne. Toward the machine. Toward the final fight for humanity's freedom. The ritual of fire. The platform carrying Ryan sank deep into the heart of the alien palace. As it moved, the glowing walls around him began to change color. Red, then gold, then a burning white. It was getting hotter, like fire without flame. He looked up one last time. The queen was gone. Guards didn't follow. She didn't need them. Because Ryan wasn't being taken to a prison. He was being taken to a ritual. The first of 3. The queen had warned him before. If you survive the 3rd night, you leave. But only if you are still whole. Now he understood. This wasn't just about stealing memories. This was about breaking him, shattering his mind until he gave in willingly. The platform stopped. A door opened. Ryan stepped into a strange room. It was circular and empty. No furniture. No guards. Just smooth, white walls and a high ceiling that looked like a glowing sky. But there was no light source. No wind. No sound. Just silence. Then the voice came. Not from speakers. From inside his own head. The ritual of fire begins now. Suddenly, the walls burned away. He wasn't in the room anymore. He was in his old bedroom, back on Earth. The smell of rain through the window. Posters on the wall. A photo of his mom and sister on the table. It was exactly how he remembered it. Then he heard it. A scream. He ran out of the room, down the hallway. His home was on fire. Smoke filled the air. Flames swallowed the ceiling, and in the middle of it, his sister stood crying, trapped behind a wall of fire. "Ryan," she shouted, "please help me." He tried to run toward her, but the floor cracked and fell beneath his feet. He landed hard. Now he was in a war zone. Explosions shook the ground. Buildings crumbled. His fellow soldiers screamed for help. Blood on the streets. A child curled in the corner, shaking. "Captain Ryan," someone called. "Do something. We're losing them." He grabbed the child and ran. But no matter how fast he moved, the battlefield stretched on. It became endless, a loop of pain and loss. Then he heard his own voice. "You can't save them." He turned and saw himself. Another Ryan, dressed in black armor, cold eyes, empty smile. "You always think you're the hero," the other Ryan said. "But people die around you. Always." "I did what I could," Ryan whispered. "You failed. Again and again. Why not let go? Why not give in?" The fake Ryan stepped closer, holding out his hand. "Give me your memories. Give me your pain. Let her take it all away. You'll never hurt again." For a moment, Ryan almost gave in. The pain was too real. The guilt, the fire, the screams. What if he just let it go? What if he let her win? Then, a sound. Small, soft, a laugh. He turned. It was a memory, a real one. Not fire, not death, but sunlight, a park. His little sister laughing as she chased him with a balloon. Their mom watching from a bench, smiling, happy for once. And in that tiny sound, Ryan felt something powerful. Hope. He stood tall. "No," he said. The fake Ryan blinked. "What?" "I'll keep the pain and the joy. I'll carry it all. Because that's what makes me human." The battlefield vanished. The fire died. The walls returned. Ryan collapsed on the floor of the ritual chamber, breathing hard, sweating, exhausted, but alive. A soft tone echoed around the room. Ritual 1 complete. He didn't know how long he lay there. Minutes, maybe hours. Eventually, the door opened again. 2 strange figures entered. Not guards, not machines. They were dressed in gray robes, their faces hidden behind smooth white masks. One held a cloth. The other carried a silver drink. "Drink this," the taller one said. "It will help your mind recover." Ryan hesitated. "What's in it?" "No poison," the figure replied. "You passed. For now." Ryan took the drink. It was cold, smooth, and tasted like nothing at all. The smaller figure handed him a black robe. "Wear this for the next ritual." Then they both disappeared. The walls shifted again. The room turned into a long hallway. Soft lights on the floor guided the way. He stood. His legs were weak. His heart was tired. But his mind was clear and stronger than ever. As he walked, Ryan thought about what had happened. The fire, the battlefield, the illusion of himself. The Queen hadn't just shown him nightmares. She had shown him truth, real memories twisted into chains. She knew where to hit him. She knew how to break people from the inside. But she made a mistake. She believed pain was weakness. She didn't understand that pain is part of being human. Ryan smiled to himself. "She's afraid," he whispered. He could feel it now. This wasn't just a test for him. It was a test for her too. She wanted him, needed him, but he was more than she expected. She was watching, yes, but for the first time so was he. And he was no longer a guest in her game. He was a threat. The rebellion begins. Captain Ryan walked through the dim hallway, dressed now in the black robe the masked figures had given him. The soft lights beneath his feet blinked in slow rhythm, guiding him through the underbelly of the alien palace. No guards, no cameras, no sounds, but he knew he wasn't alone. The Queen was always watching. She had tasted his memories in the ritual of fire. She had tried to break his mind and failed. Now, something had changed. He could feel it. The palace felt colder, the walls tighter, the air heavier. She's getting desperate, Ryan thought. The deeper he went, the more secrets he saw. Alien workers moved like machines, never speaking. He passed halls lined with frozen statues. Only they weren't statues. They were living beings, trapped in stasis, their eyes wide with fear. And on one wall, drawn in blood or rust, were the same words he had seen before. "Run before the third." The path ended at a silent door. Ryan placed his hand on the scanner. The small device hidden in his sleeve, given by the Queen's former advisor, hummed softly. The door opened. Inside was a quiet chamber, lit only by candles. Symbols covered the floor and walls, and sitting around a low table were 5 figures in robes. They all turned toward him. The leader stood. "You made it," the voice said. It was calm, strong, familiar. Ryan pulled back his hood. "So did you," he replied. The figure removed their mask. It was Dr. Sarah Lorne, the scientist who had once been trapped in the Queen's feast hall. Her face was pale, but her eyes were alive again, sharp and filled with rage. "You escaped the mind drain?" Ryan asked. "Only part of it," she said. "She couldn't take everything. A servant helped me before the process finished. I've been hiding here for weeks, gathering the others." Ryan looked around the room. The others removed their masks. 3 humans, 1 alien. Each one had escaped the Queen's grip somehow. Survivors. Warriors. "We're building something," Dr. Lorne explained. "A network. Quiet. Careful. We found weak spots in the palace structure. Secret halls. Power lines. Memory channels." Ryan nodded. "And the machine beneath the throne?" The alien spoke now, his voice low and rough. "It feeds through energy tubes beneath the central core. If we overload the system, we can destroy the device. But we need access, and we need a distraction." Ryan's face hardened. She's planning the final ritual. She wants my full mind. She thinks the last ceremony will break me. Then we use that, Dr. Lawrence said. Let her think she's winning. Ryan took a deep breath. It was a dangerous plan. One mistake, and the queen would drain them all. But it was their only chance. He looked at each of them. I'll go through the second ritual, he said. While I'm inside, you prepare the explosives and map the entry points to the mind core. We strike after the final ritual, no matter what happens to me. Dr. Lorne stepped forward. What if she takes you before we can act? Then blow the palace anyway, Ryan said. Everyone fell silent. Then one by one, they nodded. The next day came too quickly. Ryan was summoned to the Hall of Reflection for the second ritual. But before leaving, he sent one last message to the rebel team, hidden in a coded pulse through his wristband. All systems go. If I fail, burn it all. He was ready. Or so he thought. The Hall of Reflection was nothing like the fire chamber. This room was cold, empty. The walls were mirrors, endless. No ceiling, no floor, just a white void with his reflection staring back at him from every angle. And then, the queen's voice. You survived the first trial, she said softly, from everywhere and nowhere. Impressive. But fire is easy. Memory is harder. Suddenly, the mirrors began to move. And in them, Ryan saw not his past, but his future. He saw himself kneeling before her throne, smiling, giving in. He saw earth burning from the sky, ships raining down fire. He saw his friends and family, frozen in chambers, eyes wide, minds broken. He screamed, and all the mirrors screamed with him. Meanwhile, Dr. Lorne and the rebels moved through the underground halls. Their map, drawn from weeks of hiding, guided them past patrols, security beams, and locked systems. They reached the edge of the Queen's mind core. It was massive. Glowing tubes ran from every wall, filled with sparkling light, living memory. Faces moved through the light, flickering like ghosts. They planted the charges carefully. Then they waited. Inside the ritual, Ryan was breaking. The Queen's illusions grew sharper. He felt cold steel pierce his skin. He saw his homeworld turn to dust. He saw himself forgotten, erased from time. But through the chaos, he remembered something. A simple voice. His sister's voice. You're stronger than what they say you are. He stood. He looked into the mirror and punched it. It shattered. Light exploded around him. The room vanished. The Queen appeared, her face twisted in anger. You refuse your place, she hissed. You could live forever. You could become a god beside me. I'd rather die human, Ryan said, stepping back. And then, he activated his wristband. Deep below, the signal reached the rebels. Dr. Lorne didn't hesitate. Light it up. A second later, fire filled the mind core. Tubes shattered. Memory streams screamed. Lights blinked and died. The Queen screamed with them, her voice shaking the palace. The palace trembled. Walls cracked. Alarms blared. Ryan ran. The corridors shifted behind him, trying to trap him. But he kept moving. Kept running. Because it was working. The rebellion had begun. And now there was no turning back. Human will can't be broken. The alien palace was falling apart. Explosions shook the walls. Lights blinked and died. Giant cracks split the floors as the ancient foundations gave way. The once beautiful hallways, glowing with strange colors and music, were now filled with smoke and screams. Captain Ryan ran through the chaos, his heart racing, lungs burning. Behind him, memory tubes burst like glass veins. Shattered pieces of captured minds floated through the air. Images of laughter, war, love, and sorrow. 1,000 lives once trapped, now freed. He didn't know how many seconds he had left before the palace collapsed completely. But there was one thing he knew without a doubt. He had to face the queen. One last time. She was waiting for him. In the throne chamber, deep at the palace's heart. The massive room once glowed with elegance. Now it burned with madness. The throne itself was alive, pulsing, shaking, wrapped in memory cables that sparked and twisted like snakes. And in the center of it all stood Queen Virexa, her body taller, her form changed. Her skin cracked with light. Her voice echoed like thunder. She had absorbed too many minds too quickly. And she was losing control. "You destroyed my mind core," she growled. "You let the memories escape. Do you know what you've done?" "I set them free," Ryan replied, stepping into the chamber. "That's what humans do when something tries to cage us. We break the cage." The queen raised her hand. Ryan was slammed against the wall by invisible force. His ribs ached. Blood dripped from his lip. But he smiled. "You're afraid," he said. "You've tasted our minds, but you still don't understand them." "I understand enough," she snapped. "Then tell me, why can't you break me?" he whispered. The queen paused. The throne pulsed. Something flickered in her eyes. Doubt. She reached out her hand. A glowing web stretched from her fingers and wrapped around Ryan's head. And once again, he was pulled into a mind chamber. But this time, it wasn't hers. It was his. He stood in a dark field, stars above, cold wind on his face, and across from him stood the queen, glowing and tall. "This is your final chance," she said. "Let me in. Share your mind freely. I will end the pain. You will live forever, in peace." Ryan looked at her, and then behind her. One by one, his memories appeared. His mother's hands, cooking dinner. His sister's laughter even during hard days. His first step on the moon. His greatest failure. His deepest regret. And through it all, one thing remained the same. He kept going. He didn't break. He didn't surrender. He carried it all. "That's why you'll never win," he said softly. "Because being human means we never stop fighting, even when it hurts." He clenched his fists. The memory field lit up. The queen screamed as his thoughts pushed back against hers, like fire and wind. She tried to tighten the web, but it slipped through her hands. "You are just one man," she shouted. "No," he said, as his memories grew stronger. "I am every man who lost something and kept going. I am every woman who stood up again after falling. I am every child who chose hope over fear. I am not alone." And suddenly, she was the one drowning. Back in the real world, the throne began to shake violently. Cables snapped. The pillars around it cracked. Ryan's body glowed with light, not from her, but from within. She screamed again, louder now, thrashing, trying to pull away. But Ryan held on. And he whispered one final message. "Let them go." A wave of white light exploded from the throne. The chamber shattered. Memory streams flew outward, racing through the halls, through space, back to the minds they belonged to. Dr. Lorne, hiding deep underground, looked up as the ceiling above her glowed. She smiled. "They're free," she whispered. The palace broke apart. And from the sky above, Ryan's ship, still in orbit, still waiting, received a signal. One word. "Done." The AI on board activated emergency retrieval. A beam of light broke through the clouds of smoke and debris. And at the center of the throne ruins, lying motionless but alive, was Captain Ryan. 2 days later, Earth Command Base. Ryan opened his eyes to the soft beep of medical monitors. He was home. Surrounded by light. Safe. Dr. Lorne stood beside him. "You did it," she said. "The Queen's gone. The prisoners are waking up. Her memory web is broken." Ryan sat up slowly, his body aching. "I saw inside her mind," he said. "She believed that controlling emotion would bring peace, but she never realized emotion is what makes us alive." Dr. Lorne nodded. "And now the galaxy knows what it means to be human." 1 month later, Galactic broadcast. Across dozens of worlds, a message played on screens and stations. This is a warning and a truth. The Dralnary Queen is gone. Her palace is no more. We are humans. We may fall. We may break. But we do not surrender our will. If you see another queen rise, remember what one man did with only memory, pain, and fire. And deep in a hidden system, far from any sun, another voice whispered from the shadows, "Bring me the human called Ryan. I want to meet the man who said no and made the galaxy listen."